Kaminsky, keep the noise down. Okay, so web proxy automatic discovery. You've probably seen it as the little checkbox in Internet Explorer settings saying, automatically discover my proxy settings. It's kind of fun. It does exactly what it says on the tin. It's used by web browsers to find proxies, duh. But it's been adopted by some other fun things, and there's some gaping holes in it that allow you to have all kinds of fun on corporate networks in particular. It was originally an IETF standards track protocol, but it was never ratified, so they proposed the protocol, they amended the protocol, they did all kinds of work on the protocol, and then they decided it was crap, so they abandoned it. Unfortunately, that didn't stop Microsoft from implementing it, which is why I'm here having some fun with it. So at the moment, it's expired, it's not a standard, it's just nothing. It's just an IETF spec. So what does it actually do? Well, most browsers nowadays have the ability to use an automatic configuration URL to detect your proxy settings. So you give the browser a URL, it goes to that URL, downloads a thing called a proxy.pack file, more correctly called a C file. That's a JavaScript file, doesn't get executed with a DOM, that exports at least one function saying find proxy for URL. So every time the browser is told to navigate to a page, it calls this function saying where it's navigating to, and the JavaScript will tell it what proxy settings to use. So it's pretty powerful. You've got the full power of JavaScript there if you've got multiple proxies on the network, or if you want to go directly, use different links for different things, you can do all of that with this proxy.pack file. That's the fairly basic side of things. That's what the C file actually does. But what WPAD does is it allows you to automatically find the C file. So you can supply browsers this configuration file without them actually needing to be configured to find where it is. How does it do this? Well, there's a number of different methods that are used, and a couple that Microsoft have extended just for fun. Essentially, the majority of them, all they do is they return an IP address, and then the browser retrieves wpad.dat from that IP address on a web server. So you can see here the list of different protocols that are used. Can anyone spot any of those that are actually secure? No, me neither. No, that's not secure either. Trust me on this, it's fun. So why would you want to attack this? Well, fairly obviously, it allows you to become someone's web proxy. Duh. All of these protocols, they've had attacks in them, it's well known what the weaknesses are, and WPAD just uses them in new and interesting ways. It allows you to do some really neat things by attacking some really old protocols with some really old stuff. Once you've executed a successful attack, you can do a lot more than just setting yourself up as someone's proxy server and reading their traffic. There's a whole bunch of stuff that I'll get into that you can do, even as far as harvesting credentials on a wide scale from the network. The key thing about these attacks is that they're simple. The attacks that I'm going to be describing, it's either you send a packet to own one host, or you send 2 packets and own every host on the corporate network. So they're very simple, they're very traffic effective. It's much more subtle than something like an ARP flood. They're long-lived. All of the WPAD information gets cached at every stage of the way. So all of the WPAD discovery, the C file itself, everything gets cached all over the place. And you can end up owning a corporate network with this 2-packet attack that I'll get onto for a couple of weeks. They're stealthy, they're effective. As I say, it's a lot less traffic than something like an ARP spoof, and you end up with pretty much the same result. So how do these actual different protocols get used? Well, I'll come back to WINS and NetBIOS in a sec. DHCP, essentially what happens is the browser sends out DHCP inform packet saying, someone tell me what option 252 is. And that's saying, where's the WPAD server? In the DHCP response packet, you specify the full URL, it can be anything that you like. The browser will then go off and retrieve that URL and use that as the C file. It can also be specified in the initial DHCP negotiation, so it doesn't need to be like a secondary DHCP transaction. It can happen when the machine first comes up on the network. And because the machine already has an IP address by the time the browser starts up, it's perfectly legitimate for the browser to send its own DHCP inform packet, which is what Internet Explorer and Firefox actually do. Everyone knows that DHCP is trivial to spoof. It really is. All you've got to do is listen to the broadcast network. It's a broadcast protocol. You grab the transaction ID out of the packet, put it into your packet, send it back out on the wire, and you own it. Very, very simple. The only downside to it is that it's a race. You have to get your packet to your victim before the legitimate DHCP server gets its packet to the victim, or you lose. Since it's a broadcast protocol, it's only effective on LAN with one minor exception. And the upshot of it is, you send your spoofed DHCP response and you own one host. So spoof one packet, own one host. Or rather, set yourself up as the proxy for one host. SLP, according to the WPAD spec, SLP is optional. I've looked at least a dozen different WPAD implementations and never actually seen anyone using SLP. In fact, has anyone ever seen anyone anywhere on the internet actually using SLP? Service Location Protocol. Okay, so we have at least one Mac user then. Oh, Novell, even better. Okay, so yeah, nobody uses it, don't even bother. DNS, hi Kaminsky. The way that DNS works is you do DNS queries, firstly for an A record, then for an SRV record, then for a text record. If your DNS server is hosting the A record, then the WPAD discovery just gets an IP address. SRV and text give you a bit more information, and then you just insert it, the information that you can get into that URL, retrieve it, and obey it. Problem with it is that, again, DNS replies can be spoofed. It's a unicast protocol, so you have to be either on an unswitched network or you have to execute some kind of ARP spoof first. It's on LAN only, so you have to be on the same, probably have to be on the same subnet. And much as with DHCP, each spoofed packet that you send gives you control of one host's proxy server. Interestingly, this is the only public issue that there's ever been with WPAD. It turns out that the way that the WPAD discovery goes with DNS is it iterates through the DNS search domain, stripping each subdomain out as it goes along, and eventually it's supposed to, hit whatever parent domain is exporting WPAD queries, WPAD name, and then use that. Unfortunately, the Internet Explorer implementation of this forgot that some top-level domains are in two parts. So some guy registered wpad.co.uk and instantly owned the entire United Kingdom. Apparently he still sees requests for it as well, so yeah. That wasn't me. This was a long time ago. This was about 5-6 years ago.
Because lots of 404s and an undefined number of
Something like that. That sounds about right. So yeah, no spoofed packets, own the country. Okay, so when you put DNS and DHCP together, you get another problem. A lot of the time in a corporate network, name resolution is combined between DNS and DHCP. So you'll do your DHCP discovery, you'll register your name, and then your DHCP server will propagate a record into the DNS server saying this host is DNS. So what if you do a DHCP negotiation and claim to be called WPAD? You end up with a perfectly legitimate WPAD entry in the DNS server that points to you, and you can then take over the entire network. We actually see this fairly commonly between DMZ networks and core networks. So if you're looking for a way to bridge from a DMZ into a core network, WPAD's your man. It can sometimes be forwarded through routers, firewalls. There's all kinds of that people do with their DHCP stuff. It's not entirely clear where you end up in the DNS search domain. Chances are it will be announced by DHCP, but you can speculate. Because it's all DHCP, you're limited. You can't just inject yourself into any arbitrary DNS search domain. So you might have problems with scoping, but you can probably do something. So the upshot of this particular attack is that you do two legitimate packets. You send two legitimate packets, perfectly normal DHCP negotiation, claiming that your host name is WPAD, and you own the corporate network. You get your DNS record inserted. Now, as it says at the bottom here, I didn't come up with this particular attack myself. Given that it involves DNS, any guesses? There we go. Mr. DNS himself. Okay, so that's the basic WPAD mechanisms. That's how the spec defines it, as it working. Microsoft have added a couple of extensions to this. Now, given that it's not actually an official standard, they're not extending the standard. They're extending something that doesn't exist. So, there's no embrace and extend here. Obviously, it's only implemented by Internet Explorer and some other Microsoft goodies we'll get back to. WINS, it's a unicast protocol. You send a name lookup packet to the WINS server, and it gives you a response. It's essentially pretty much exactly the same as DNS. The difference is that anyone can update it. So I can plug into your network, send one packet for a DHCP request to find the WINS server, send a second packet to the WINS server, registering the WPAD names, and say, oh, I'd like those names for 2 weeks, please. And for the next 2 weeks, anyone that goes to WINS looking for WPAD resolution will then come to me for their proxy settings. So 2 packets, own the corporate network for 2 weeks. The important thing about this is that WINS is unicast, it's not broadcast. So it will be forwarded by routers. And generally what we've seen is that if you've got a big, complex Active Directory, big forest, lots of domains, lots of subdomains, you'll still generally have one WINS server, or at least multiple WINS servers running from the same record set. So you can be anywhere on the network. You can be in a branch office, you can be in a sub-network, you can be anywhere. And you register your one WINS name, and you own the entire network. So you can imagine, you can plug into any segment on the network, you send 2 packets, and you own the whole network. It's good fun. NetBIOS name service, again, this is IE specific, and it's essentially DNS over broadcast. So the only thing that DNS has going in its favor is that it's a unicast protocol and difficult to sniff and get the transaction ID out of. NetBIOS name service doesn't have that because it's broadcast. It's trivial to sniff and spoof, and again, it's back down to spoofing one packet, owning one host. Again, it has a lifetime. The NetBIOS records get cached. So again, you can say, I want to be your proxy server for the next month. You've got as much of a race as DHCP spoofing if the network is actually implementing WPAD. So if you're on a network that doesn't use WPAD, then there will be no other response to the name lookup, in which case you win the race, guaranteed. If they are using WPAD and they are depending on NetBIOS name lookup, then you've got the same race as you would with DHCP. The thing is with it, it's much quieter than a DHCP attack. You can be very selective about it. You can decide exactly which hosts you want to attack. You can send, just very, very specific, very precise attacks into the network for just the hosts that you want to compromise. So basically, if I get on your LAN, if I can get on your broadcast domain, I own you. That's not really big news because there's been lots of attacks that do that. DHCP spoofing, ARP spoofing, 802.11 evil twins. It's nothing great. The only big advantage of WPAD attacking is that it's much quieter. On a corporate network, you've got serious problems. Your traffic will probably be hijacked. If the corporate network is implemented either or DHCP updating DNS, then I can own you. And this is relatively new because I can do it from anywhere on the network. It's equivalent to the VLAN trunking attacks that FX released a few years back, where he essentially just said to the Cisco infrastructure, I want to be on that VLAN. And it would route it all the way through the network and put him on it. This is essentially the same thing. You just say, I want to be your proxy server. And it goes, OK, here's my traffic. It's done. Simple version, home users, some cable modem networks do allow broadcast traffic. My cable modem back in the UK did. My cable modem here in the States doesn't. So your mileage may vary on that, but certainly if you can see broadcast traffic from peers on your network, you can own your cable modem segment as well. At Starbucks, surprise, you're vulnerable. And in the enterprise, you're newly vulnerable. This is a new, wider scale attack against the enterprise. So that's how you set yourself up as someone's proxy. So you can take advantage of all these protocol flaws and you can become someone's proxy server. So what? You can see their traffic. Well, big deal. However, when you think about how many sites nowadays, eBay, Amazon, PayPal, all of the various blog sites that will authenticate you over SSL and then they'll switch to plain text just because they can't sustain that much continuous SSL traffic. So although you don't actually get to see their password, so you can't authenticate as that user, you can see their cookie, so you can masquerade as that user. So you still end up with the same end result, you just can't log on again if that person logs off. So you've still got a problem there. Some other things that you can do, you can hack the client, I'll get back to that. There's some really fun attacks against SSL, which I'll give you a demo of a little bit later, and then you can do some really fun stuff with credentials, courtesy of Internet Explorer. So, I'm the proxy. I can do whatever the hell I like to you at this point. You can browse to any page on the internet, and I can inject whatever I want into that page and give it back to you. Now, bearing in mind, this has all happened transparently. There's been no user interface at this point. There's been no notification to you that anything is going on. As far as you're concerned, you're browsing the web. You have no indication, no way of knowing that you're going through a malicious proxy server at this point. So, when you start through me, I wait until I see Internet Explorer version something I have a 0-day in. And then I just inject my code into it, and I own you. Failing that, if I want to get low tech, if I don't want to go to the hassle of looking up the current batch of IE 0 days, sorry, Bree, then I can just add an executable or add an ActiveX. How many people would think twice about surfing to Microsoft.com and seeing an ActiveX in control? Exactly. The fact is, it's not Microsoft that's providing that ActiveX, it's me. So yeah, there's a lot of things that you can do, and again, because you have no way of knowing that there's something bad gone on, you're liable to be a bit more forgiving with the digital signatures. If your ActiveX isn't signed by Microsoft, you're going to look at the URL and say, well, I actually typed in www.microsoft.com, so why the hell wouldn't I install this? At which point, I own you. Some SSL attacks. Again, I'm the proxy, so I'm proxying your SSL traffic as well. If both your browser and the server that you're going to support SSL v2, I can do a downgrade. So I can downgrade to 56-bit SSL v2. If I'm really determined, I can break that, chuck a couple hundred FPGAs at it and you can do it in a reasonable time. Fortunately, IE7 disables SSL v2 by default. Go Microsoft. Even lower tech than that, if I can FPGAs, I can just avoid using SSL completely. So anytime you request a page, I can just rewrite the URLs that say HTTPS and just remove the S. How many people would notice? Would you notice that the address bar on your browser hasn't actually changed color? Even better than that, some sites do actually require you to authenticate over SSL. They won't let you authenticate over plain text. So I'd have to put some kind of token in there saying this was originally an URL, and then when that comes back through to me, rewrite it and send it out over SSL. As far as the site's concerned, it doesn't care whether the SSL is coming from me, the proxy, or you, the browser, as long as it's getting SSL. So, all of that stuff, it's pretty easy to work around. The attack that is my own personal favorite is SSL spoofing, which requires somewhat naive users, but I implemented it anyway. So the way that it works, my malicious proxy that I'll give you a demo of in a few minutes, when you send a connect request to HackProxy, what HackProxy does is it will connect to secure.paypal.com or whatever. It'll retrieve a copy of the PayPal certificate. It'll then generate a new public-private key pair and re-sign the certificate and then present that certificate to the client. It's actually quite easy to do. It's about 10 lines of OpenSSL code. So the end result is that all of the attributes in the certificate are perfectly valid. The canonical name, the expiration date, everything is perfectly valid. The only thing that's wrong with it is that PayPal have now signed their own certificate. So unless you actually understand the significance of that, unless you understand PKI and you understand that these things have to be signed by a root CA, chances are you're just going to accept it. Most people would look at it and say, oh, yeah, Amazon.com signing their own certificate. Yeah, I trust Amazon. I'll accept that. At which point, I own you. It's not a huge leap. You can see that would be a successful attack in a lot of circumstances, a lot of people. Now, the way that the two main browsers handle this is actually quite an interesting comparison. In Firefox, when you get confronted with one of these certificates, it's very easy to pull up the details of the certificate. It's very easy to view it and look at it and decide for yourself whether or not you trust it. It's also easy to say, yes, I'll permanently cache this certificate. So, of course, HackProxy will just cache any certificates that it generates. So if you do choose to accept the certificate permanently, then I've owned you. In IE7 handles things much differently. It's very difficult to take a look at the certificate. It's a lot of clicks that you need in order to actually view the certificate at all. In order to get anything more intelligible than it's broken, you need to click on a lot of things and navigate a lot of dialogues and all the rest of it. But at the same time, it's also very difficult to accept it. So it's a lot of clicks required. It's harder on both fronts. So in general terms, what this ends up with is that if you understand PKI, use Firefox. If you're a noob, use IE. Nothing new there. So I mentioned credential harvesting earlier. A couple of ways that you can do this if I'm your proxy server. First thing I can do, and most obvious thing I can do, is just send you a basic auth request. It's really easy. Your browser will pop up a dialog saying, please enter your username and password. Okay, so Microsoft.com's trying to authenticate me. What the heck? You might get a bit suspicious about it, but it's universally accepted. All browsers support basic auth, and me as the proxy, I get your credentials back in plain text. Now, Internet Explorer, on the other hand, has a fun little feature, NTLM. What it will do is it will decide whether or not you are on the same network as the server that you're accessing. And if you are, it will transparently authenticate on your behalf. So it will just automatically send your credentials out to the site. Now, it is kind of limited. It won't do this for everyone. Microsoft learned that lesson a long time ago. It won't just send your credentials to any arbitrary site. However, it will always authenticate to its proxy server. Because as far as IE is concerned, it's my proxy server. It can own me anyway. Why wouldn't I authenticate to it? So you can do NTLM challenge response completely silently. No user interface, no chance to defend against yourself. And at least in IE, it's pretty much guaranteed to work. The downside of it, hashed credentials instead of plain text credentials. Now, there is some fun that you can have with that as well that I'll get back to in a sec. In the meantime, I just want to show you WPAD, my WPAD tool and hack proxy. So, in fact, let me stay here. So, this is what happened when I plugged into the Shmoo network for about 3 minutes. On the top at the moment, you can see the WPAD attack tool, and you can see there's a few different DHCP queries coming in. You can see it getting somewhat confused by a broadcast query. But you can see there's some different IP addresses in, and then you can see at least one person actually requested the C file. On the attack proxy side of things, you can see that whoever it was that received that C file then started sending requests through my proxy. So at least one person on the Shmoo network is now owned by me, and is currently wondering why their browser isn't working, because their proxy that they didn't ask for is currently offline. So they should. Sooner or later it'll say, okay, this whole WPAD thing is just not working. I'm just going to give up on this. So it is an acceptable solution if WPAD fails to just completely fail over. So I want to show you some of the more advanced things that these tools can do. I've actually got them running here. Oh, good Lord, it's been going crazy. So over on this machine, I should have Windows. Woo! So I have Google. Yay. The only thing that I've done here is in my connection settings, I've left automatically detect settings, so it is using WPAD. Yes?
So the WPAD attack is limited to, you get this option when you're setting up your internet connection, right? It presents you an option where it says, do you want to search for proxies by default?
Yeah, it's on by default.
And that was my second part, is by default.
Yeah.
So
In IE, at least, it's on by default.
there's some complexity to that. But
There is. We'll get back to it a little later on. But that's basically why I've been hammering on IE so much, because IE has it on by default with some restrictions. Nobody else does.
And then just another quick question. So you hit the WPAD, the proxy.pack, whatever, every time you make a website request?
No, the way that it's supposed to happen is the browser will request the proxy.pack file each time it does WPAD discovery. It will then cache that file and call a JavaScript function every time it requests a URL.
What's the JavaScript?
what proxy to use for that URL. For every request, it will call that JavaScript function, yes. Yeah. Okay, so IE is doing WPAD, and I've then got Firefox here as well. And in the case of Firefox, I've actually had to tell it to auto-detect proxy settings. So Firefox doesn't do WPAD by default, but it does support it. So as you can see, I can get online. So what I'm going to do is just show you some of the other stuff that Hack Proxy. I didn't do that. So some of the other stuff that Hack Proxy can do, instead of just acting as a perfectly normal proxy, which is what it was doing, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say, right, so what I've done to it now is I've said, spoof SSL, so generate these fake SSL certificates and cache them in that folder. So in theory, if I come back here now, and I go to, I don't know, let's try logging into PayPal. Now I know you can't see it, but on this machine the proxy is currently going apeshit. And you can see I've got my certificate dialog. All of the information looks correct. The issue date is correct. The organization, all of that is correct. The only thing that's wrong is the certificate hierarchy is broken. So most users wouldn't know what to do with that. They'll just see it's PayPal. The date's good. The name's good. I don't know what's going on here. I'm just going to accept this. And if you do accept it, let's accept that permanently just for the hell of it. Again, the proxy's going crazy, but you can't see that. Oh, PayPalObjects.com, same problem. Ah, double click. No, don't like double click. Won't accept that one. Damn it. Oh, okay, I'll accept it, whatever. Okay, so yeah, I had to accept a whole bunch of certificates. But now, if I close Firefox and restart, because I've chosen to accept those certificates permanently and Hack Proxy's cached them, in theory, if I do that, Hack Proxy will now present exactly the same certificates that Firefox has already accepted, and in theory, it should just load the page, no errors. Proxy's still going kind of crazy, but yeah, you can see that that works. Now, Internet Explorer, on the other hand, is slightly different. Oh, I'm about to use SSL. Warning, warning. Okay, Internet Explorer just plain doesn't like me today. Okay, whatever, Internet Explorer's not going to play the game today. But suffice it to say that it throws up all kinds of dialogues, and you have to click a million times just to accept one certificate. Then you go to PayPal and you get like 12 certificates that you're spoofing, and it just takes you forever. You've got a million things to click on. It's like one of those little flash games where things are popping up, like whack-a-mole. Kaminsky, come on.
It's much better to prevent the SSL from coming up in the first place by doing your rewriting attack rather than try to spoof users using SSL.
Yeah, it's much quieter, but an intelligent user will notice that their address bar is white instead of yellow.
For a certain site,
It's subtle.
you've already given it your credentials.
Yeah, exactly. So the different approaches to doing it. So something else that I can do in Hack Proxy, and this is the one that is actually kind of fun. Okay, so let me just switch back here so I can show you what I'm talking about. Hello? Ah, okay. So what I've got here is I've got a token file. So what this does is, I don't know if you can all see that. Make that a bit bigger. Woohoo! So what it's doing, the first line is the user agent. So it's saying to Hack Proxy, apply this token to any user agent. You've then got a before and after. So it will look for the before string and insert that chunk of HTML after that, or it'll look for the slash body in this case, and it will insert that HTML immediately before slash body. So you can do, pre-insertion or post-insertion. So if I tell Hack Proxy to actually use that, and then I come back here, it does some pretty interesting things to the eBay homepage. Eventually. All looks fine until you scroll down and Foon owns you. Oh yeah, it'll do it in any of the frames, so it'll probably have some fun on Microsoft.com as well. And again, because I've got the SSL spoofing active, it'll be doing exactly the same thing over SSL websites as well, but with the associated dialog errors. So Foon owns Microsoft.com. Right at the bottom. But the point is, with Hack Proxy, I can specify any token that I want to insert. So I can specify any chunk of text to insert at any point in the resulting page for any user agent or combinations of user agent. So I can take my Firefox 0-day and I can only send it to Firefox clients. I can take my IE 0-day and I can send it just to IE clients. Or I can take something cheesy like this and insert it into everything and just, have some fun with people. Question? Yep. Yeah, the specification defines which protocols it uses in which order, and then Microsoft extended that by adding Wins and NetBIOS ahead of anything else. Yes, that's correct. It also uses Wins and NetBIOS under different circumstances. It behaves differently if you're on a DHCP IP address rather than a static IP address. Yeah, absolutely. My WPAD attack tool, it just attacks everything. It'll even do DNS spoofing if you can be bothered to combine it with an ARP spoof. So it's pretty easy. Okay, so that kind of proves the concept. One thing I didn't show you was the NTLM challenge response. Now, as I mentioned, Internet Explorer is happy to automatically authenticate to its proxy server. I think we've lost oh no, here we go. Completely transparent, no user interface, no clicks required, nothing. And the proxy can negotiate NTLM v1. Fortunately, NTLM v1 is globally disabled in Vista and is disabled in IE7 on any platform. So they've done good on that. But certainly IE6 will quite happily negotiate NTLM. So the proxy will send a challenge, the client encrypts the challenge with its response and sends it back. Now, the joy of this is that because the server is choosing the client, unlike NTLM v2 where both sides choose a challenge, the server can use the same challenge every time. And then because you're using the same challenge every time, the only variance is the password. And because the only thing that's changing is the password, you can generate rainbow tables for it. So you can take this challenge response mechanism and you can just do a pre-computation attack against it. Is there anyone here from freerainbowtables.com? Stand up. Everyone, remember this face? Feed it beer at every opportunity. And then when you get home, send it some money via PayPal and give it some CPU time. Basically what these guys are doing is it's distributed rainbow table generation. Think SETI at home for rainbow tables. It's fabulous. They have a whole bunch of rainbow tables for all kinds of different algorithms, one of which is half LM challenge, which just happens to consist of a static NTLM challenge and a rainbow table of the response. So they are offering up via BitTorrent 59 gigabytes of tables for this attack. It's great. And then you don't even need to bother patching your client. You don't even need to bother patching rcrack. You can just cut and paste the hashes into Kane Enable. Kane Enable, it's designed for NetBIOS authentication, but it's still NTLM v1, so it still works perfectly. So precisely, zero effort involved. So the upshot of all of this is that clearly you can pwn anything. Between the code execution and exploiting 0 days and inserting crap into web pages and getting credentials and all of this good stuff, the chances are you can pwn anything. In some circumstances, it might be difficult. If you've got a particularly intelligent user using a very up-to-date browser who understands PKI and all the rest of it, you probably can't get into them. But how often does that happen? You might have some hashes to crack, so download the rainbow table, sit on the torrent for a couple of weeks. It is much more efficient than phishing or farming, largely because you can be very, very precise, and instead of the PayPal website, you are the PayPal website. So even if you allow the original authentication to go through over SSL, you can just represent the login page and say, sorry, your authentication failed. Can you put your password in again, please? Who would notice that the second copy of the form wasn't presented over SSL? You can do it. You're the proxy. So you can take lasting control of browsers. WPAD.dat gets cached for quite some time. According to the spec, it should be WPAD negotiation should take place every time the browser starts. Firefox does, Internet Explorer doesn't. If you're on LAN or somewhere on the corporate network, chances are you can pwn the whole corporate network. And once you've taken control of WPAD, you can do all kinds of stuff. There's lots and lots of avenues for attack. It's not browser specific. Crypto API goes online periodically to update certificate revocation lists and root CAs. And it does a WPAD discovery before it does. So if I just switch here to... No, not at all. The setting in the browser controls your particular user settings. If you log on, even as a different user, you'll redo WPAD. Very good question. Let me come back to that one. Okay, so as I say, here you can see that it's IE7 doing a WPAD discovery. You'll see all kinds of crazy user agent strings coming in there. You'll see crypto API, you'll see Windows update, all kinds of system stuff that you really would like to have some fun with. In addition, the ISA client uses a form of WPAD, a similar protocol, to find its servers. So you don't need to configure the ISA client at all. It just does WPAD-esque protocol discovery to find its servers. It then does do a layer of authentication on top of that discovery, though. So on the surface, at least, I've not looked into it in too much detail, but on the surface, that authentication is sufficient to cover the weaknesses in WPAD. To answer your question, yes, the browser WPAD can be controlled. You can either uncheck the box yourself, or deploy a group policy to uncheck it for you. Windows WPAD is not so easy. In theory, Windows Update is hardened against malicious binaries, but it still does WPAD. In theory, it can be disabled, but I don't believe MSRC have actually figured out how to do it yet. Kaminsky's looking blank, so I'll take that as a no. Uh-oh, that was from Microsoft. So yeah, there's some fun. Now, here's the real irony of this. If you are using WPAD, if you have deployed WPAD on your network, you are less vulnerable. How often does that happen? So in order to fix the problems in this protocol, you have to deploy the protocol. How the hell does that work? So, I mean, chances are you probably don't want to deploy WPAD. You don't actually want to use it. Actually deploying it and using it is the simplest way, but you can fake it. You can offer up your C file, you can set DHCP option 252, that's all pretty easy. The DNS and WINS fixes are slightly more obscure. So what we worked out with Microsoft is that, certainly in the client, group policy, uncheck the box for all users, and the client side is pretty much fixed. However, the browser side is pretty much fixed. Yes, that's correct. However, I don't know of any sysadmin keen on deploying like enterprise-wide group policies at a moment's notice. So, kind of touchy subject there. So, a better fix is server-side. The fundamental problem on the server side is that name resolution should be trustable for WPAD to work. Name resolution is not trustable, therefore WPAD is broken. So what we need to do is find some way to hack it. You can't just register fake addresses. You can't just go to your DNS server and say, yeah, WPAD lives at 1234. There's all kinds of stuff in all kinds of places that will just break. It will believe you when you say there's a proxy server at that address, and when it can't find the proxy server at that address, it'll crap itself and fall over. So what do? Well, in MSDNS, you register a name without an address. It's pretty easy. You just register the existence of a WPAD text record, obviously in every DNS search domain. It blocks the A record from being created, and the clients just won't understand. It's a text record that is meaningless. So in this case, you're deliberately forcing WPAD to fail. If you're using something other than MSDNS, if you're using bind or something else, chances are a similar fix can be deployed. WINS, on the other hand, is significantly more convoluted. I won't go into the details of this. I see someone taking a picture. He's obviously using WPAD. The WINS fix is horrible. It's a nasty, nasty hack, but it works. The slides will be up on the IO Active website. If you use it, don't worry about the quality of your digital photos. Go to the IO website and you can view this.
There's also going to be a knowledge-based article.
Yes, there is a knowledge-based article. I don't know whether or not they're putting out an advisory. That's all kind of up in the air. We're not sure about that at the moment. But certainly there is a KB article about it, which I'll link from the slides on the IO website. So little side notes about IE. IE7 just refuses NTLM. Vista refuses NTLM v1. IE7 does have a really offensive user interface for bad certificates. Think like Vista asking, are you sure you want to do this? Like to the nth degree. It's insane. It's like 12 clicks or something stupid. Despite all of that, though, it will still quite happily leak machine credentials. So even if you disable WPAD in the browser, you'll still get machine credentials leaking from Crypto API, Windows Update, all that kind of fun stuff. Possibly. It's really unclear. Even more unclear is whether or not WPAD is actually on. Certainly, if you log on to a machine for the first time and you fire up Internet Explorer, it will do a WPAD discovery. However, if that WPAD discovery fails, it will disable WPAD. In some situations, it will re-enable WPAD. So it seems to be able to kind of automagically switch between on or off, completely at random. I've been running network sniffs for weeks trying to figure out what the hell the logic is behind this, but it's magic. That's all I can say. It's Internet Explorer voodoo. So, summing it all up, WPAD, the biggest effect is if you're on the LAN or if you're on an enterprise network and you can send traffic to the LAN. If you're deploying WINS or DHCP through DNS, then you've got a problem. The biggest risk is new users of IE, so people who are logging onto a machine for the first time and firing up Internet Explorer, but given the voodoo that goes on behind the scenes, some old users will be vulnerable as well. The best part about all of this is how selective you can be. You can be selective as to what usernames you grab, what hosts you grab, what web pages you mess with, the whole lot. You can fine-tune it to your heart's content so that you only mess with the CEO. Whatever you want. The moral of the story, don't let DHCP or WINS leak from your DMZ into your core network because you will be pwned. And disabling it in the browser does not fix everything. So yeah, by all means, go home and uncheck that little setting in Internet Explorer. Don't expect the problem to go away though, because there's still Windows services that use it. Now, just in the interests of complete fairness and full disclosure, I've focused on Internet Explorer quite extensively in this, so I wanted to put this up just to explain why. The services in Windows, all of them will always do WPAD, currently. We're working on trying to figure out how to disable that at the moment. I believe the knowledge base article addresses it. IE 6 and 7 will initially do WPAD and then switch it on and off at random intervals thereafter. Firefox and Conqueror both support WPAD, but neither uses it by default, so you have to actually go around to each machine and check the box. If you're doing that, then you might as well go around to each machine and just specify the curl. Just give it the URL to download the proxy pack file from, and exactly the same amount of effort. Opera and Safari don't even bother with WPAD, so yeah. So that's why I've been focusing on IE, because although Firefox and Conqueror are vulnerable, IE is more vulnerable out of the box. Any questions? I wrote my own. And during writing it, I realized I didn't know anywhere near as much about HTTP as I thought. I doubt very much if I'll release Hack Proxy. I might release the WPAD tool. Once the knowledge base article's out and things have kind of calmed down a little bit, I will probably post the WPAD tool just so that you can get an idea of how many users are vulnerable. Hack Proxy is never going to be released. It's pure attack. It doesn't need to be a proxy. What you can do is the WINS registration says where to go to get the C file. And so what you can do is you can construct your JavaScript so that most of the traffic goes through either legitimate proxy servers or direct, and you only have to proxy the traffic that you're interested in messing with. It's not like an ARP spoof where you just globally get everything. Dan?
The knowledge base article is out, and it's 934864.
934864. Knowledge base article. Go read it. Have fun. Yes?
So, if you happen to have some sort of like PKI deployed, like MS certificate services, is there no capability inside here to sign the pack file that you get or proxy? So services will only handle signed files?
I'm not aware of there being any mechanism to sign the C file, but there might be one. I've certainly seen no indications of signed C files anywhere. I've not seen anyone mention anywhere anything about signing the C file. It would make sense. Some of the WPAD mechanisms allow you to specify the full URL, so you might be able to force that into SSL. I don't know. I doubt it, to be honest. Yes? It's supported by default. Sorry, Firefox 1.5 and previous. As far as I know, Firefox has supported WPAD throughout its entire history and has never had it on by default. Any more? Yes?
It seems to me that proxy pack file, there should be a lot more fun to be had with that.
You would think so. I spent quite a lot of time looking at it, but the problem with it is that it doesn't have a DOM. So it's just pure JavaScript in abstract. So if you can find an error in the JavaScript parser, you can have fun with it, but you can't, execute cross-site script or anything like that because you can't access the DOM.
So all you can do is output an IP address.
You output a string that contains either a proxy IP and port or the word direct. But yeah.
I mean, you don't always put out the same IP address.
You don't have to.
For example, rather than shoving all of the traffic out
Yeah, absolutely. You can say, I only want to see traffic that you're sending to PayPal.com.
Right, that way you don't have this big flow going.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the beauty of it. You can be as selective as you want to be. Any more? Excellent. Beer time then. Thank you. It'll be up on the IOActive website. It'll be up in the next. Send me a mail if it's not up in the next day or two, but it should be there.
You mentioned that part of the ISA client
It uses a protocol that's derived from WPAD. It's not WPAD itself, but it works in the same kind of ways. It looks for different names and it looks for slightly different details, but it does essentially work in the same way. But then once it's found an ISA server, it does authenticate the server. There's a second layer of crypto and authentication on top of WPAD, which certainly on the surface appears okay. So yeah, ISA client certainly use a variant of WPAD, but it appears to be okay so far. But I haven't taken the time to actually deploy an ISA server in a VMware environment yet.
So once you have a proxy pack, is there a way to validate that and force it to fire again? Just time. Maybe return an invalid response. If the JavaScript appears to fail or points at what seems like a dead proxy, is maybe
Possible. Yeah, possible.
if you can implement that, then within the proxy pack, you can have a mechanism whereby you can force it to essentially refresh itself.
Yeah, the way that it should work is that every time you start the browser, it should redo the WPAD discovery. So it should refresh that proxy pack file every time.
Right, because you said it in
IE,
IE that was cache.
yeah, IE is a bit more selective about it. It'll certainly, every time it renegotiates its IP address, if it's the HCP, it'll renew the WPAD info and re-grab the C file. If you're on a static address, it seems to just do it, every 24 hours or so, I think. So it's fairly short-lived, but you can provide the same information as many times as you like without a problem.
Really enjoyed the WPAD stuff. I was just curious why you're calling about the SSL version 2 attacks.
Yeah.
were you actually able to downgrade that tech because you
I wasn't because I couldn't be bothered to get that far into OpenSSL. But certainly it is possible if both ends support SSL v2. It's an old attack and there seems to be very little information about it, so I've kind of been working in the dark with it, and I've figured out that it is possible, and I think I've got enough information to implement it. I just haven't done so yet. Now let's talk more. I'm around tonight and I'll be here tomorrow.
Oh yeah, you're supposed to do this, and if you don't, your timesheet won't get filled out. So every member, just click OK.